Before the season even kicks off, soccer fans are already making predictions. Who wins the league? Who qualifies for Europe? And who's lifting the trophy at season's end? On Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code CUP26 to get $10 when you trade 10. KALSHI, Kalshi. Trade the beautiful game. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
Hello, I'm Jason Lee, and you are tuned in to Tricky Talk.
Who hits it low into the corner. Mass control. Wood, who gets it back here through Gibbs. Yeah! Towards the back post. Yes! In! Igor Jesus! Back post.
Hello and welcome along to the Tricky Talks podcast. We are back after a little summer break and get straight back into it with a Fantasy Premier League special. The new Premier League season is almost upon us, so you are more than likely also thinking about creating your FPL teams and perhaps wondering which Forest players you should be selecting. On the show this week, we have a very special mystery guest to help you make those decisions. Before I introduce him, Chelsea's here with me as well. How are you, Chelsea?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really excited about this pod. I'm looking forward to talking about all things FPL. I've created my team. Not sure I'm going to stick with it yet, but we'll see how we go over the next couple of weeks.
Excellent. And followers of the pod will know that you deliver an FPL update every week, Chelsea. And I know you sometimes think I'm an FPL wizard, Chelsea, but wait until you've heard from this guy. So let me introduce everyone to someone who has 9 top 50k finishes in the world. The mystery and the anonymity are real. Welcome to the founder of LazyFPL, the Professor. Welcome along.
Hello. Looking forward to being on this podcast. I've got a lot of questions myself about Nottingham Forest this season. Yeah, so this might actually turn into me hosting and you guys are the guests, and then I'll steal everything that you say and regurgitate it on LazyFPL's podcast and just sound like I know loads about Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, we'll do our best to provide you with some genuine content
so
there.
You have to give me good stuff.
We will indeed. But first of all, before we get into the nitty-gritty of discussing Forest and from an FPL perspective, would you mind, Prof, giving me and Chelsea and everybody a breakdown of the origins and history of LazyFPL? And I know I'm an avid content follower of your stuff, and I love it. And you're my go-to for all things fantasy nowadays. I know there's a lot of content out there, but I've kind of looked at all of it and adopted LazyFPL as my go-to. But where did LazyFPL start and originate from, and how did it come about?
Yeah, sure. So for anyone who doesn't know what LazyFPL is, it's a newsletter that drops into your inbox 24 hours before every deadline. And the reason why it was created is because there's a lot of people who play FPL who don't have the time during the week to keep up to date with injuries, suspensions, positional changes for players, new signings, managerial changes, the whole 9 yards that affects the decisions that you make going into the weekend. And what usually happens is if you miss that kind of information for 3 or 4 weeks, you're eventually going to give up on the game. So we thought, what if we created something that for the busy manager, for the busy casual manager, where they could instantaneously get up to speed with everyone else who's been spending 3 or 4 hours on Twitter a week, catching up on what to do for the weekend for their fantasy football team. So in essence, it's that. How it came about, I have a friend, James Copeland, who writes the free newsletter. We met on Reddit, if anyone's familiar with Reddit. A number of years ago, I was writing comedy on Reddit unsuccessfully and trying to submit scripts to the BBC. It wasn't going very well. Not telling any of my friends actually what I was doing, for fear of being skittered. But he liked my stuff, so he reached out one day and noticed that I was also posting about fantasy football occasionally. We started some less than successful projects with our other friend, Jamie, who also is one of the owners of LazyFPL. And it just so happened that eventually we got to an idea that actually worked, and that is LazyFPL.
Why lazy? I know. I've followed the history, so I've got a certain amount of knowledge behind it. But why lazy?
It wasn't even called Lazy FPL at the start. It was called FPL Tips, and it was just so generic and boring. And we were we were talking about how to. No one's ever asked that. We were talking about the product becoming. I don't want to call it a product, right? We can do that in the edit. We were talking about Lazy becoming more than what it was at the time. And one way we were doing that is trying to illustrate to people who, again, maybe didn't have the time to keep up to date with the happenings in the football world ahead of a game week deadline for FPL. And the idea that a lazy manager might want to tune in and read our newsletter week to week just became the phrase that was coined. And then, obviously, 2 + 2 = 4. You end up calling the thing Lazy FPL.
Awesome.
However, there's a significant roadblock when you launch a premium product and you're calling the thing lazy, and the people who sign up for that are then kind of not lazy. So yeah, we, like most things, we didn't think it through.
So you mentioned about premium products as well. So the standalone product is your newsletter that drops in 24 hours before a deadline. But what do you offer those that subscribe to your premium offering in addition to that?
The best way I can put it is, if you want to improve at FPL, I'm biased, right? But it's the best and cheapest service within the FPL landscape to basically improve at FPL, and there's a lot in the FPL world. If you listen to this podcast, you've probably seen it advertised to you on various avenues like Twitter, Facebook, whatever, where it'll be a lot of team solvers, transfer solvers, put your team into AI, find out how good your team is, and we will tell you exactly what to do. And it's not the way I want to see fantasy football played, so we wanted to create something where it was taking the lessons and the fundamentals from the elite managers who have achieved success, season on season, but ensuring that people who play the game and sign up to the service remain in control of their own teams. They're making their own decisions. They're Nottingham Forest fans watching football week to week and then stress testing their opinions on football via the fantasy element. There's various ways we do that. Obviously, one of them is additional newsletters, which are more analytical. Simon, you can probably attest. I hope you read them. I hope you read my newsletters.
I do read them. Yeah, I do read them.
The more analytical, the more editorial. You get 2 of them a week, and then there are WhatsApp groups like our broadcast group, which is basically FPL updates directed immediately to your phone. And then we also have a podcast, which does contain a lot more general football takes, but alludes a lot to fantasy football too.
I think you've got a Forest pod
in a nutshell.
Coming up.
In a nutshell, if you want to win your mini league, you want to sign up.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you said you've got a Forest podcast version coming up imminently, so hopefully we can use this podcast to provide you with some good content for that. But
that is my plan. Plan.
Talking of Forest, Chelsea, you were going to ask him about Oliver Glasner and things fantasy from that perspective, weren't you?
Yeah, obviously, because now we're going into our new manager. It seems to be quite a common theme for Forest over the last season. So, yeah, we're now going in fresh into the season with another new manager, but not mad at it. Not mad at it at all. Obviously, Glasner's obviously very well respected in the Premier League, as we've known previously. With having his style of play coming into the team, from a fantasy perspective, how do you think that that's going to help aid Forest players within the Fantasy Premier League?
Right, so this is directly through the lens of fantasy football, right?
Yeah.
Oliver Glasner, he's very good at getting production from specific players. Usually that's a limited pool of specific players. Mm-hmm. We're talking 3 assets a season that they seem to get all the goals, all the assists, and are getting most of the touches inside the box. Last season, Mateta, Sarr, Munoz. Before that, in that pool would have included Eze. The rest of the players, from a fantasy football perspective, are basically facilitators. So those players can get touches in the box, they can get shots, they can get XG, they can get XA. This is what I'm looking forward to from a Forest perspective under Oliver Glasner this season. Because if you're looking, let's just do the general comparisons, right? And I'm sure you guys have been doing a lot of this. Basically, in one hand, you're holding Crystal Palace, and the other hand, you're holding Nottingham Forest. In one hand, you've got Daniel Munoz. In the other hand, you've potentially got Nico Williams.
Yep.
In one hand, you've got Ismail Assar. In the other hand, you've potentially got Morgan Gibbs-White.
Yep.
In one hand, you've got Mateta, maybe Strand Larsen at times last season. In the other hand, you've got, who I presume will be Igor Jesus, although we will come on to Nottingham Forest recruitment shortly, I hope, because I want to pick your brains.
We will.
Those, whereas you would have had with, let me think, Roberto De Zerbi's Brighton first time around, that was a team that, from a fantasy football perspective, spread their returns across multiple players. So you had Solly March, Karu Matoma, Pascal Gross. Off the top of my head, who else can I think of that was picking up returns at that time? Pervis Estupinan picked up a lot of returns too. Can't remember who their striker was. Evan Ferguson picked up a lot of returns. He's the kind of manager who, opposite to the way Glasner operates, again, from a fantasy football perspective, has a spread of returns. Glasner has like these pillars of reliable picks that, when teams like Nottingham Forest will go through favourable fixture runs, it's not going to be a case of you pull up Nottingham Forest team, you start scrolling through and you're thinking, who do I pick? Who do I pick here? There's going to be 3 names that are eternally obvious all season. And I think I've named them. However, I would like you to sign a new striker.
Yeah, we'll come on to that, because I think Chelsea's pretty accurate in what he says there, isn't he?
Oh yeah, definitely. When you were doing like the comparison with like Mateta and Sarr and like with Palace, you can really see it, and it's very obvious that Glasner can attract more players than any other kind of manager that we've had in the last season, and we can very much see that. I do feel as though with having Glasner, it's almost like we have just been elevated a bit more within the Premier League. Not saying that's not down to the players that we have, or being able to get into Europe last season. I know we only finished the bottom half of the table last season, but it does feel like that we're becoming more of an established team. When you look at like your Brentford, who are now much more of an established team, not the big 6 as you call it, but I do think Glasner's actually helping that within the group. And I think from a, like you said, from a fantasy perspective, it is kind of working within that.
Crystal Palace finished 15th last season. I think their underlying data had them around 7th. They were incredibly unlucky to finish 15th. Variants hit them hard at several points during the season, especially around December when the wheels started to come off, and that's when you had Glasner going to the press basically saying, I don't want to do this anymore, please sack me so I can get a big payout. Crystal Palace said no. What transpires is a European Cup. He's the kind of manager who's been at that level of underlying performance basically since he entered the Premier League. I actually think, in a roundabout way, and it seems strange to say, I actually think he's a bit underrated as a manager. And it's the reason why I think it's difficult to say that is because I think everyone respects Oliver Glasner. The guy's just won a European Cup. But he wasn't... When you see Andy Iraola getting linked with the Liverpool job, when you see Michael Carrick getting the Manchester United job, sometimes you do think, and maybe it's because he is quite combustible, especially with the press. It seems he's that way with owners too. I know he was that way in Germany too, as before he got the Crystal Palace job. Maybe that's the roadblock in terms of a bigger club. And I say that with all the love, by the way, because I support Everton. So, Everton and Forest basically hold hands in the Premier League. Maybe that's what's prevented them from going to a bigger club. But I do think there's an essence of him being underrated due to the league position this year that Crystal Palace achieved compared to their underlying data. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how he does with Nottingham Forest, because for the start of the season, 3-4-3 is incredibly difficult to implement. We've seen that with Ruben Amorim recently. I think Antonio Conte is probably the only manager in my recent memory that's come into the Premier League and been able to immediately implement a 3-4-3 style of play. You've also got a World Cup season in which I'm unsure how many World Cup players Nottingham Forest had, but even if it's only a couple, it would have been important players that are coming back to the squad late or late-ish. So when you're picking up a new formation, I've noticed even in pre-season, you've been playing James McAtee centre mid. There's players that are having to play out of position while you wait either for new recruitments or players to return from international tournaments, so then you can fully settle them into the new formation. That is intriguing. That is interesting. Off the top of my head, I think you have 3 okay home fixtures to start the season. I think 2 dodgy away is Arsenal and Aston Villa.
We've got Leeds home opening day. We've got Liverpool away.
Liverpool away.
Spurs
and Villa away, right?
And Villa away, yeah.
Yeah, they're difficult away fixtures, but your home fixtures are quite okay.
Mm.
If he can win those home fixtures and look like he's got the boys playing competently under a system that's difficult to learn, could be on for a good season, recruitment pending.
That's probably a nice segue into the position groups, isn't it, Charles? Because we do want to take a bit of a deep dive into these groups and talk about some individual players. And if we group the goalkeepers and the defenders together, you obviously have Matt Sells, who won the Golden Glove a couple of seasons ago, coupled with Williams, who you've mentioned, and Ola Aina, who are the likely wing-backs as it stands right now. Plus, you have Murillo, Milenkovic, and an interesting one that they signed today, Prof, in terms of Ousmane Diomande, who's going to form the third pillar of those 3 centre-halves. You've touched on Williams being one of the 3 main pillars from a fantasy perspective across the whole squad, but what do you make of the position group as a whole? Are there any players who stand out to you as potentially could be one to watch or will offer some significant returns week after week, bearing in mind we now have DEFCON as well?
From a football perspective, and just jumping out of me FPL suit for a moment, I would like us to sign a new goalkeeper. I was one of those people when you signed Matt Sells, the season that he had in 23-24, I don't know if you understand how bad that was. His save percentage was something like 20%, maybe even tiny little bit lower. I'd have to go back and check. But I remember quite vividly going into the 24-25 season when you overperformed and you were like 3rd in February. I remember going into that season, and Sai, you probably heard this on podcasts and stuff when we do previews before the season, or I write in-depth analysis on teams before we go into the season. I was hammering Matt Sells. I was saying there's no way Nottingham Forest can go into a season with this guy between the sticks. It's impossible. He's just terrible. And for that reason, you can't pick any Nottingham Forest defenders. What happens? He has a season where I think at one point he had 70% saves percentage. Complete anomaly. But then I look like an idiot saying what I did. But I think as time's progressed, I think I've been justified a little bit. Maybe I'm being harsh. Again, you guys watch Forest week in, week out. I don't. John Victor, didn't he have like a bad game of Villa or Spurs?
Yeah.
And he hasn't been. Did he fake an injury? Am I remembering that correctly?
It's funny you say that. He conceded a really, really bad goal away at Villa and then went off injured, and then we never saw from him again. It was a season-ending injury. Mm.
And do you know why we absolutely love Sells? And as far as Forest fans, even though when you said about that save percentage, is because before we've had Matt Turner.
Yeah, you used to have terrible luck.
With flashbacks from Matt Turner, so anybody was going to be better than Matt Turner. So I think we were a bit, we had our rose tinted glasses on with whatever people.
Look at the game after, yeah. That's like with Everton now. If we get a right back, I don't care who it is, they will be God. Because we have not had a right back for about 10 years. Well, Seamus Coleman was still playing for us and he's like 39. So I completely understand that perspective. So yes, from a football perspective, I would like you to sign a goalkeeper. I understand if it's not a priority for Nottingham Forest at the moment, but please sign a goalkeeper. Defence. You got really good defence. Ousmane Diomande, that's just came in. He's well versed in playing in a back three. He's played in the back three with Sporting for a number of years now. He can play. I know he predominantly plays right side of centre back, and he's got exceptional recovery pace and understanding of how to defend the channel when a wing back bombs on. But he's competent playing in the middle, and he's competent to play at the left as well. It's very obvious signing, and it's no surprise that I think the rumour was Liverpool were trying to hijack that, trying to sniff in and pick him up before you guys did. So expensive, but I imagine, especially given Glasnow's such He's so dogmatic with his 3-4-3. I think that's one of the best signings you could have possibly made in terms of defence. Again, pinch of salt. There's a lot of translation from Portuguese league to the Premier League, so maybe it takes him a little while to get up and running. But in terms of just the profile, it makes a lot of sense. Milenkovic is interesting because he's basically your Tarkovsky in terms of how aggressive and front-footed he is. Mm-hmm. For DEFCON, Tark gets a lot of DEFCON simply because he's the defender that's first in for the header. If it's a goal kick, if it's a long throw, if it's a set piece, he sweeps them up. You guys have Milenkovic. Murillo, what is interesting, Murillo, again, jumping out of an FPL perspective, is, and I imagine we'll come on to this naturally, the progression that you've lost with Elliot Anderson. I'm wondering if, especially with the back three, Murillo picks up a little bit of that in terms of passing out from the back and then breaking the lines, going into the what you'll have with the dual 10s now, sitting behind the striker. Really, really looking forward to that. There's a couple of times in the pub when I've watched Forest and I've watched Murillo play. You might have it when you watch Iliman and Jai. Do you know when you just watch someone who plays for a different team, you're like, this guy's cool. I like watching this guy. Murillo gives me those vibes, and I think he'll be quite adept in playing in a back three as well as the player who steps in. Back onto an FPL perspective, Nico Williams, you're hoping that he replicates something similar to Munoz, to Daniel Munoz. Ole Einar, I like him as a player. I'm not sure he's got the gas tank to do up and down the way Glasner likes for 90 minutes. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe this is an ignorant take from a fan of Everton who doesn't watch a lot of Forest. But the impression that I get is you probably need a left wing back. Again,
and I think that's certainly, if you believe stories in the media, Reed from Feyenoord is the one that they've been tended to be linked with over the past couple of weeks, although it's all gone quiet on that front. I know Roma reportedly were also interested, but they seem to have pulled out. But he would be one that fits that profile of how Glasner wants to say, I would perhaps more so than Ole Einar. In fact, and given Einar's age and his injury history, if they were to sign a fullback or a wing back, you could perhaps assume that he would be Ole Einar's long-term replacement in that role.
It'd be interesting because I don't know the profile of that player. I'd have to look him up and then pretend to know what I'm talking about, which is what I do for a lot of footballers. But the way Glasner played, it was almost asymmetrical. At times. It'd be Mitchell, who was more defensively minded, and then he would literally have Daniel Munoz as basically a second striker. Now, I don't know if that was the case because of the personnel that he had available to him, or it's simply the way he likes his formations to set up with a lopsided attack. David Moyes is quite similar. Again, I just make Everton references because it's my bread and butter. But he's quite similar in that he funnels a lot of his attacks down the left side, and the right side basically shifts inside, basically to crunch the pitch, ensure if they lose the ball, they can collect it again. And despite the fact that it's quite predictable in the way we're going to attack, the idea is plan A trumps everything, right? Whether that is what Glasner goes for at Nottingham Forest, or he tries to balance out the way his wing-backs attack, is yet to be seen. Very interesting. Chels, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course you can.
Do you have any Forest defenders in your FPL team?
Yeah, I do.
Who'd you have? Who'd you have?
It's not set in stone yet. But I do have Williams.
Yes. Okay. Cool. So I'm on the right track.
Yeah, I have gone for Williams. It was a toss-up between Milenkovic and Williams. I was thinking about DEFCON points, and I was thinking about last season, and I did put Williams in towards the end of last season, and in terms of getting points, it did boost me towards the last I'd say about month and a half. He's a consistent player, Williams, and he's only been getting better. So for me, that consistency that you see in him last season basically outshines it all. And he was getting assists. I can't remember how many goals he got last season, but I just feel like as a solid, reliable player to get DEFCON points, I feel like it was just essential to have him in. I kind of tend to go for a back four. That's my thing with FPL.
Okay, cool. So I'm along the right lines in terms of Nico Williams and Milenkovic being the standout options. Well, this is nice.
Now I would throw Murillo into that as well, because you touched on it earlier, Prof, around will he fulfil some of those Elliot Anderson responsibilities? And Forest fans, it's a bit of an in-joke, I think, in that if Murillo picks the ball up on the halfway line, he's more than capable of just charging for goal and sticking one in the top corner, and we're all willing him to do that. You might remember there was a game at Fenerbahce where he picked the ball up in the centre circle and ran straight through and scored in Europe. He did it he almost did it at Crystal Palace when he was new. He did a very similar thing in that he ran straight through the middle of the defence and almost scored. He almost lobbed the Spurs keeper from inside his own half early on in his career at Forest as well. Those are typical Murillo type moments, and we're all just waiting for him to do that, one of those again, aren't we, Chelsea? The writings, it's set in stone that Murillo will get one of these wonder goals eventually.
Oh yeah, it's been in the pipeline for God knows how many seasons now, and it's got to happen.
Yeah.
He is in my FPL name, so he has still got to do something. He's got to do something for me in relation to my name. I'm so proud I made that up as well, and I didn't Google nothing.
What's the team name?
Yeah.
Well, so I'm Murillo Kintyre. So our song is Mull of Kintyre. So I done it as Murillo Kintyre, and I was so chuffed with it. And I'm like, could you do something for my name, please? I've had it. This is my third season. I've had it now.
Right, that's probably good transition into the midfielders then. We've done the defence. Now on to the midfielders. There's a couple of players I want to talk about, Prof, in particular, for initially. One is Ryan Yates and the other one is Gibbs White, who you've mentioned. Now, Ryan Yates seems to be getting a hell of a lot of love in a lot of the drafts that I've seen, and he's almost at 7% ownership, I've noticed, which, if you know Ryan Yates, we all love him to death. He's Forest through and through. He's the club captain, but he was in and out of the team last year, and he never really consistently laid down a regular starting position, and it seems to be, from what I can gather, it's going to follow a similar pattern this year. So I know he's cheap, but for those who are looking for a reliable midfielder, 4.5, I think his price value is. I'm wondering if they should be looking elsewhere due to the minutes risk that he's got, really. That's
Ryan
the first
Yates,
one.
Yeah, Ryan Yates is, I think he's of like the Mark Noble, Seamus Coleman, Jordan Henderson ilk, in that everything that you hear, and just me just stumbling across comments from other fans on Ryan Yates or something a journalist written, is that he is phenomenal to have around at a club. Like he sets the standard in training. He welcomes new signings. Like he's probably the guy who's in charge of the players' WhatsApp group, and integrates new signings and lets them know this is the way. This is what the club expects. This is how the dressing room works, etc., etc. He's not an FPL pick. I don't understand why he's got 7% ownership. I think anyone who is willing to sort of lift the lid on Ryan Yates will quickly see, oh, this is a guy who helps the club out, but probably has reduced minutes on the pitch. And he's one of those players who is happy to have 20 appearances across a season for 400 minutes. Like, it'll just be sporadic. When the club needs me, I'll fill in. I even think, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't been keeping as much attention on Forest pre-season as I could have, I guess. But I think he's been playing centre-half in pre-season as part of the back three.
He did. They played against Udinese and Barcelona in two 45-minute games last weekend, and he played as one of three centre-halves in that first game against Udinese, mainly due to the fact it was a numbers issue, I think, rather than anything significant in reading that's where he's going to play long-term. I just think it was one game in isolation, if you like, in that role.
But this perfectly illustrates my point on Ryan Yates. He's a player that you can have around in the squad and say, Ryan, we need someone to drop into the back three and help the team understand how to play, where to stand, when to take possession, when to not take possession, and he can fulfill that perfectly. He's an excellent squad player, especially in modern Premier League standards, where I think as people have garnered more information into the deeper workings, the deeper machinations of Premier League squads and what managers and coaches favour, players like Ryan Yates have become more understandable to the general public than they would have been 10 years ago. But from an FPL perspective, he's not a pick.
Yeah, and the thing is with
sorry, go on, Chelsea.
No, the thing is with Yatesy, you love to have him in your squad, but gosh, he is such a frustrating player to play against. He knows exactly when to go down. You know, at any point if you touch him, he's going to go down. He is absolutely infuriating when he's not on your team. And that's the same. There was rumours about him going to Ipswich Town. And you know, when you go, oh God, then he's going to go to Ipswich Town, then we're going to have to play against him. You know, he's going to go down and break up play, and we're going to have to then go against that. So yeah, I wouldn't pick him for my FPL team. Nothing against him, but in terms of minutes and, like you said, just how he is.
Somebody I would pick for my FPL team is Morgan Gibbs-White, whose ownership as it stands last time I looked was around 11.6%, which is the second highest behind Williams from a Forest perspective. But I'm not hearing much love from him at all, Prof. I do a lot of research on social media, and I know I've seen all of the drafts that are going around that you guys do, and certainly in Club Palmer, the WhatsApp group as well. Nobody seems to be talking about Gibbs-White, yet the way he played at the back end of last season and the role he's going to be fulfilling this season, in that he's listed as a midfielder but will be fulfilling that number 10 role, i.e. Sarr, makes me wonder why more people aren't talking about Gibbs-White. What are your thoughts there?
It's interesting that you, as a Nottingham Forest fan, have identified him as the Sarr type of player, because from an outsider looking in, it's not that I don't think he will be, it's that I'm unsure as to who will be. So, from an FPL perspective, first and foremost, he costs 8 million. That's a lot of money in FPL, and with FPL, you want to play the fixtures as much as you can. And Manchester United open the season with Hull away, Ipswich at home. So the first thing you should be doing with your team is having at least 2 Manchester United attacking assets. Now, that is likely going to be Brian Mbeumo, Matheus Cunha, and definitely Bruno Fernandes. You then may pick up one of the United...
Oh, yeah.
I've
done one thing right.
You got those two? At least 2 of those things. Right. So you want those two, right? So there's 2 of your 5 midfielder slots gone. It's also quite a chunk of change in terms of the 100 million that you have to spend. Bruno's 12 and Buemo's 8. That's 20 million gone. 50 your budget. You then probably want a Manchester United defender. The best one that you can probably get is Maguire. There's another 5 million gone. So already you're looking low on funds already. You've got Erling Haaland on top of that's 15.5. And now you're looking behind the couch for a couple of quid. The fact that Morgan Gibbs-White costs 8 million means that with current squad composition in terms of building for the best start in FPL, he's just priced just a little bit too high. What you're looking for in midfield to combine with a Bruno Fernandes and a Buemo are more of your cheaper DEFCON midfielders. So Christian Norgard is 5.0, Pascal Gross is 5.5, Elliot Anderson is 6.5. And I understand that these are less exciting players than Gibbs-White. And if you're just in the office week to week and you're just looking to win a work mini league and you're a Forest fan, completely understand why you would throw Morgan Gibbs-White in. But if you want to be better at FPL, the hard truth is that you have to understand that squad composition works this way. And including someone like Morgan Gibbs-White, 3 million more than a Christian Norgard, 2.5 million more than a Pascal Gross is going to severely impact your ability to select players in other areas to attack the fixtures the way you want to attack them.
Yeah, I
got that out the way, right?
Yeah, absolutely know where you're coming from, because when I did my very first draft this season, Gibbs-White was the first name on the team sheet, but since then he's not in my squad anymore. So for the aforementioned reasons that you've said exactly. So
you start seeing other players becoming available that you wouldn't know were options. So maybe you didn't have João Pedro at the start and you see he gets a brace against Barcelona and you're like, ooh, need to raise some funds. And you start looking around your squad and you see Morgan Gibbs-White at 8.0 and you think, if I chop him down to a 6.5, I can get the funds to upgrade Dom Solanke or whoever it was that you had in the forward line.
I'm going to throw a name your way in a moment, Prof. But before I do that, are there any other Forest midfielders that you think ought to be under consideration given their price points? I know we talked about a couple, but are there any others that you are looking at and think that that's a potential differential?
I want to ask you questions. I said I was going to do this. So Forest are going to play with 2 10s more than likely, right? It's the same way that Glasner played with Yeremy Pino and Sarr behind Mateta. One of them is usually a connecting player. Even Michael Olise fulfilled this role when he was playing for Palace. He'd be the connecting player. Eze was the likely to go ahead, although Eze was fairly connector-ish himself, but he got more shots. I think he was averaging something like 3 shots per 90 when he was playing for Palace, which is exceptional for Premier League level. You don't really have a connecting 10. So I'm looking at Hudson-Odoi, who I do think can play the 10. But then if Hudson-Odoi was playing in the 10 next to Gibbs-White, I'd probably expect Gibbs-White to connect more than run in behind. Just based on what I've seen from Glasgow in previous seasons. Dan N'Doye, I love a dribbly boy. Like, I am big on dribbly boys, and Dan N'Doye is phenomenal. If you watch them during the World Cup, Switzerland give him the ball, Dan N'Doye does dribbly stuff. Again, not really connecting 10. Omari Hutchinson, maybe could do a bit of that. Bachware, love Bachware, wanted Everton to sign Bachware. Devastated Nottingham Forest didn't play Bachware more. Hate Sean Dyche for not playing Bachware more. Just so I could watch him. Just so I could see. I just want to see him. He played against... Sorry, we're going off topic here. Who did he play against last season? Was it Chelsea away? And I was watching him. And I was going, what are you doing? Play this guy, please. I've been waiting all season to see him. I'm having to tune in to like European fixtures to see him get 23 minutes. Please, just as a football fan, let me watch him. So back where I don't think he can. I wanted Everton to sign him again this season, but we've got Brennan Johnson. Back when I don't think he could do it. McAtee, when you guys signed McAtee, I thought, thank you very much for taking the bullet for Everton and not signing McAtee. I do think he's an okay footballer. I just worry where his position will be on the pitch. Interesting, by the way. So Elliot Anderson leaves Nottingham Forest. I just want to get it on account. I'm an Elliot Anderson believer. I think he's worth £130 million. I've seen other people say he's not. I couldn't disagree with you more. I think he's literally one of the top 5, top 3 centre midfielders in the world. I genuinely believe that. And I think he'll prove it at Manchester City, if he hasn't already proved it for England in the World Cup and for Nottingham Forest last season. But what you lose in Elliot Anderson and what you're trying to sort of refill the tank in the Nottingham Forest centre midfield is both ball winning and progression via the pass. And I think Sangare maybe can provide that ball winning. You've signed Schlager, who can maybe provide some carrying, a little bit of extra carrying, but I worry about his minutes in the Bundesliga over the past 2 or 3 years. Always suspicious when a player's only got 16 starts every season from a possible 38. Alarm bells start going off in my head. Yeah. So what you're essentially trying to do when you drop McAtee back to the centre midfield is make up the loss of Anderson in the aggregate. So you say, well, we can get player A, Sangare, to make up for the ball winning, and we can get player B, McAtee, back to recruitment. I hope you sign a central midfielder to make up for the lost progression that Elliot Anderson gave you. It's so hard to do it in the aggregate. You see plenty of teams all the time. Everton lost Romelu Lukaku, right? With Manchester United signed them. And rather than replace Romelu Lukaku, because you can't if you're Everton, you just can't. Nottingham Forest cannot replace Elliot Anderson. Every so often, you'll get a team in the lower half of the table that produces a unicorn footballer, like you guys have with, well, you didn't produce them, but you signed them and then developed them. You get what I mean? And you just can't attract an Elliot Anderson level. All you got to do, go out and sign Pedri. You're not going to do that. So what you have to do is make up for it in the aggregate. With Everton, when we lost Lukaku, we signed Gylfi Sigurdsson, we signed Wayne Rooney, we signed Davy Klaassen. The idea was those guys chip in with 7 to 8 goals a season, and that makes up for the Lukaku hole in the team. It doesn't work that way. Very rarely it works that way. So a problem I have with Gibbs-White and the Nottingham Forest midfield is the Elliot Anderson hole. And I want to see how you reproduce Elliot Anderson's production in midfield when it comes to progressive passes, when it comes to progressive carries, before I'm interested in shelling out 8 million on Gibbs-White or taking a chance on Omari Hutchinson, Dan N'Doye, whoever else there is.
There are so many question marks over all of those plays in terms of how many will be the connector alongside Gibbs-White. We don't really know yet if anyone's going to nail down that role. The one name that I did want to throw towards you is, and you've already mentioned it, is Schlager from Red Bull Leipzig, because he's cheap at 5 million. Whilst he's not been bought as a direct replacement for Anderson for the reasons you just said, you just can't do that. I do wonder if he's going to emerge as a differential. And he does have some pedigree. And if Bayern Munich were interested in him, then he's got to have some pedigree. And he scored in a behind closed doors friendly during their recent training camp. And yes, whilst I acknowledge minutes has been a concern over the last couple of years due to injuries. I think last season, correct me if I'm wrong, Chelsea, I'm not sure whether you'll know this, but he did play most of the season last year. So he's hopefully touched wood, he's over his injury problems. Again, it remains to be seen whether he can hold down that regular central midfield alongside Sangare or not. But if he can, then I'd like to think he's going to be a good contributor, both from an FPL perspective and progressing Forest forward as well in terms of what they do on the pitch. But I think his price point is probably a fair reflection of the unknown quantity that we're getting for him at the moment at 5 million. I have had him as a placeholder in my team, but he won't be there for game week 1, I don't think. It's a wait and see for him, for me.
Yeah, so last season in the Bundesliga, I think he had like 1,800 minutes, which is just decent. It's not terrible by any metric. 80th percentile for successful dribbles, 93rd percentile for dribble success. So when he does pick up the ball and run with it, he's extremely competent. He's got a good success rate. 96th percentile for ball recoveries. Now with tackles, interceptions, clearances and blocks, which all amount to the cake that is DEFCON, they were lower 50th percentiles. But what he seems to be good at is when there's a loose ball in midfield, he's good at snapping onto it and then progressing it forward via a carry.
Yeah.
There is the Bundesliga tax to consider. Have you heard of Florian Wirtz?
Yeah.
He didn't have the best of season. It was okay. It was an okay season. But there is an issue in players coming across from the Bundesliga. It's not very strong at the moment. So this is not to write off Schlager at all. At all. Could come across, could adapt immediately, could be brilliant. Absolutely, completely understand that. But with FPL, again, everything I say, well, not everything, but most of what I say is coming from an FPL perspective, right? You've just got to wait. You've got to see how this plays out. You've got to see his position on the pitch. His minutes are going to be so important. One of the things that people don't really understand when they're just playing casually fantasy football is how important expected minutes are week to week for players that you want to own. If your player is not getting 90 minutes, if they're coming off 70, 60, 75, etc., you're losing such a portion of a game where you could have picked up an extra tackle that got you 2 points. You could have been on the end of a cross. So many goals happen now in the last 15 minutes of games. So I need to see Schlager's minutes. I need to see how he sets up in this Forest team. But I agree, at 5.0, potential bargain.
It brings us nicely then to our forward line, and there are really only 2 strikers that are worth talking about, and that is Wood and Jesus, of course. Now, Wood's coming back from the World Cup. Prof, I know you mentioned there's concerns around how quickly he can get back to match fitness, and Jesus has been on fire in pre-season, I think, hasn't he, Chelsea? He's scored three or 4, I think, already in pre-season, and there's a couple of friendlies left to go. So I typically don't usually include any Forest players in my team unless they are obvious, because I don't want to jinx them.
I was going to say that's superstition, Simon.
It is a superstition thing. However, I am on the verge of making an exception for Igor Jesus this time around. Now, I know in that price point there are other options, like Dominic Calvert-Lewin is one that springs to mind. Robbie is perhaps another of Sunderland, but Jesus has got my nod right now. Prof, what are you as keen on him as I am, or are you a little bit wary of him?
By the way, before we get into Igor Jesus, which midfielders from Forest do both of you have in your fantasy football team at the moment?
I don't.
Chelsea?
I do have Gibbs White.
Okay.
I do also have Fernandez. I've been having a little play about with my money, and I've been. It's been hard. I'm not going to lie, it's been hard.
Yeah,
it's been hard.
It is hard.
Put Fernandez and Haaland in at the same time, as well as then trying to want Gibbs White as well.
Have you got Igor Jesus as well?
I have.
He's tripled up.
I have. No,
what a fan!
Yeah, I have.
What a fan! Good for you.
Now I'm that fan where I'm more superstitious in terms of I won't put Forest to win. That's where my superstition lies, not in FPL. Whereas I'm like, yes, get me them points, and I will put Forest players in, because when you watch them every week, you can see where pieces that you can fit into your FPL to gain you those points, because you're watching them all the time, so you can understand them better. So I've got 3. I'm chuffed with my 3. They're sitting there nicely for now.
I don't. Prof, I said I don't particularly choose Forest players. However, last year I was on Elliot Anderson really early last year. I had him in my team from game week 1, and obviously I got the rewards from that last year. But typically I don't tend to choose Forest players unless it's an obvious selection. And Jesus for me is one at the moment. I might change my mind, but it depends how he gets on this week in the last couple of friendlies. But I'm going to stick with him for now, I think.
He's 6 million as well.
He is very interesting. Is he nailed? Is he going to start the season for Forest?
As it stands right now, I would say yes, probably, given the fact that Chris Wood came back late from the World Cup, or later, I should say, and Jesus didn't. He had the summer off. So as it stands right now, I can see Jesus being the number 1 striker. However, when Pereira was manager, he was playing Wood up front and Jesus in the 10. So there is always that risk there that, Glasner might feel as though he can do that role.
Interesting, because then you could get Gibbs White as sort of the connector, and Jesus is the one that runs in behind the striker.
That's what I would do.
And that worked really well last year when Chris Wood was up front, obviously coming back from injury. Jesus wasn't prolific in terms of the Premier League, so he dropped to the number 10, and Gibbs White played left 10, and the 3 of them, it worked really, really well. But that was Pereira. That was the old manager. The new one might obviously have different ideas.
Who was it when you were playing that way that you battered? Was it Chelsea away?
Yeah, it was Pereira.
Yeah, it was the backward game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was phenomenal. That was Gibbs White on the left, because I remember I brought in Gibbs White that week, and I seen him playing left wing, and I was like, why isn't he playing behind the striker? And then he just got returns anyway, so I was just a happy bunny. It was fine. It was absolutely fine.
You need to sign me up, Prof, because I'm telling you about all the Forest players, not the other way around.
I told you before. I think we were in the lobby before we started recording this, and I was saying, like there's so many. I obviously, as part of LazyFPL, I comment on every single team within the Premier League, and it's incredibly difficult to stretch your brain across that many teams and not get stuff wrong, or more nuanced ideas for players that you are, as fans, seeing play out in front of you. Managerial decisions, whether someone's nailed or not, can be a bit of a mystery to someone who's just like a general practitioner of fantasy football. So yeah, absolutely. Local fans have always got far more knowledge on the teams than I could ever hope to have. So I'm leaning on you for some of this. Hence why I'm saying, is Igor Jesus nailed to start game week 1? Because if you're telling me he's very interesting. Remember we were talking about earlier, Glasner has these pillars in his team where he expects elite production from 3 players and the rest facilitate. Ismail Assar and Mateta, there's within non-penalty expected goals, you can burrow down and get that for non-penalty expected shot, which is the quality of shot a player has taken on average. About 0.15 non-expected goals per shot is the sign of a good striker who's getting good shots, or a good midfielder who's getting shots. Any position, if you're getting 0.15 around that mark, you're getting good shots. Ismail Assar and Mateta have been around 0.23 for a number of years now. Now, what that tells us is that Glasner had a system in which he was able to generate good shots consistently for specific players. If he can do that for Igor Jesus, Chris Wood, whoever is playing up front for Nottingham Forest, I want them. I want them in my team, especially if they're playing 90 minutes. If Gibbs White's getting 0.23, anything north of 0.2 is exceptional. If any of your players are getting that on a consistent basis, they're coming in. I just need to see whether Glasner is capable of replicating what he had at Crystal Palace within those pillars of players in the Nottingham Forest team. However, I'd still be tempted to take the chance on a Igor Jesus at 6 million and wait to see if that plays into reality. And then if it doesn't, then go, okay, maybe he's not as good as Mateta is at getting chances. I can flip-flop around the 6 million. 8 million for Gibbs White's too much. That's too pricey for me to take the chance. 6 million for Jesus. It's interesting.
Don't hold it against me if it doesn't come off, but
I will. I'll be back on. I'll be back on this podcast.
Yeah. Right, Chelsea, I know we're quickly running out of time. You wanted to ask a question around chips, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, because I openly admit I'm absolutely bloody awful at playing my chips. I will never triple captain Haaland again, because when I did, he got me 6 points. So I never will do that again. I've made a vow to myself. So with, obviously, chips at the first half of the season, everyone's excited to use them. Everyone feels like they know a bit more of like when to play them. However, post-Christmas, chip strategies for post-Christmas. Do you have any tips for, not our listeners, me, just me?
Yes, I have fantastic tips. And to receive them, you can sign up to LazyFPL. It's £5. No, of course, I'll tell you. Right, so yeah, the good news about the chips in the second half of the season. So for those unaware, last season FPL HQ changed the rules. They give us a full set of chips for the first half of the season. That resets on January 1st, in which we get a second set of chips for the second half of the season. First half of the season chips, use them whenever you feel like whenever either you feel it's most fun, or if you sign up for LazyFPL, whenever we hint at you is an optimal time to use them. That's fine. Second half of the season are structured. You have to use them. Well, don't say you can use them whatever way you want, but if you want to win the Work Mini League, where you've paid £5 to enter, and then in the summer you get like £70 for finishing top, you want to beat your mates, if you want to start rubbing shoulders with the likes of me or other top FPL managers, it's simply, if you love the game and you want to get better at it, you have to play your chips in a structured way in the second half of the season. And what we get due to FA Cup semi-finals and European congestion is we'll get double game weeks. Mm-hmm. And with double game weeks, you have to play your chips in them. It's the simple maths is, if you wildcard before the double game week, you load up your team with players who are playing twice in the next game week, that aforementioned double game week. And whereas in a normal game week, you would get 11 fixtures from your team that is playing, you're starting 11. But the combination of wildcard and bench boost gets you 30 fixtures in a single game week. Now, it doesn't take any more explanation to say that's a lot more points. Yeah. So, Chelsea, if you're following along, LazyFPL, the newsletter is free. There's a free newsletter that goes out week to week, and it will give you your strategy for the second half of the season. I would say if you wanted to burrow down, if you were interested in getting better at the game, if you wanted more security in beating the people around you, then I'd say sign up for premium. But the free newsletter will give you, it'll arm you well for the second half of the season, and it'll put you in better stead than putting you using those chips.
I tell you what, I'm coming for you, Simon, this season.
It will, and I can echo what Prof said there, Chelsea, in that I was a bit like you a few years ago, a bit of a novice. With Forest not being in the Premier League until recently, my interest in FPL wasn't as good as it is now, for sure. Yeah. And I've certainly got a lot more knowledge now when to play my chips. And I don't know whether you remember, Prof, a couple of seasons ago, I was following along the chat groups and outlined my strategy of how I was going to select my team, thinking 4 or 5 weeks in advance. And you responded to that comment and said, yeah, that's absolutely, you were really pleased to hear that, because it meant that you've been listening and taking note of the content that you've been providing. So I've screenshotted that and kept it, so.
No, I love it. I like it when the players who come along and are trying to improve at FPL, eventually it's inevitable that you'll get to a level in which I'll write something in a newsletter or I'll say something in a podcast and you'll think, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't play that way. You shouldn't be doing that. And then I'll get a message and it'll be something like Simon shared, where it's like, off the back of learning, I've laid this out. Or it'll be, I don't think you were right there. And I love it. because if football's subjective, like I can teach you how to be good at fantasy football, but at the end of the day, everything's still subjective. It's still, you're still at the behest of your team, the decisions you make, why you make them, And I like to always say, everyone who plays fantasy football is just stress testing their opinions that they've got, that they're saying in the pub, and it's a chance to go, I just said that in the pub. Do you know what? I'm going to try it in my fantasy football and let's see if I'm right or not. It's a phenomenal game. It's obviously, I love it. Talk for hours on it.
we're coming to the end now. Prof, have you got any questions you'd like to quickly send our way on Forest or anything like that before we draw to a close? Anything you want to know from us?
No, I'm quite happy that a lot of my ideas, other than Igor Jesus, who I didn't know whether he was as nailed as you two guys seem to think he was, I'm quite happy that I've aligned with you two on, like, you even took Gibbs White out of your team because you're trying to balance your value.
Mm. Yeah, I'm very much in your corner in that I'm attacking the fixtures in the first 5 weeks. So,
can I ask you, where do you think Forest finish?
I think they've got. Go on, Chelsea. You go first.
No, well, with Forest, I'd like to have a comfortable mid-table position, but that's not going to happen. There's going to be a battle somewhere, isn't there? I would like to sit 10th or 11th.
Yeah, I was going to say something. Yeah, I was going to say something similar because I know they've struggled. They've either been at one end of the table or the other. It would be nice to have a season where they're not at the wrong end of the table. And this year I think they can do it because they've not got the congestion of European games. They've got a fairly decent squad who are playing quite well and got to obviously the Europa League semi-finals last year. I think if they have a bit of luck and stay clear of injuries, make a couple of good signings in addition to the ones they've already made, a lot of the other teams might struggle. You've got your Sunderlands, your Palaces, your Brightons, your Bournemouths, who are going to struggle in Europe with balancing that and the Premier League. And I think Forest could easily supersede those teams this year. So I'd be disappointed if Forest weren't in 10th or higher.
Yeah, I'd go, as long as you maybe sign a goalkeeper, get a central midfielder in, and then, I don't know, maybe you've got a more luxury purchase somewhere in the team with the Elliot Anderson money. Maybe a left wing back as well. We need that. We need that through the door too. And then with those guys in and 40% of the league playing in Europe, I think you can dream a top half.
Yeah,
why not?
So
why not?
I think European qualification has got to be the aim this season, whether that's through the league position or through a cup. I think that's got to be the aim minimum.
Yeah, you just finish one place behind Everton, probably.
Yeah, probably. Right,
we play each other. We play each other December 19th, by the way. So I'll be messaging you then.
Yeah, very quickly from me. One more thing, few quick fire questions.
Go
Hopefully
on.
Nothing too difficult. Forest players only. Who's your must-have?
Do you know what? I'm starting to think it might be Igor Jesus. I'm starting to think, just because, and sorry, I know this is quick fire, but you've listened to me on podcast, but I'm not quick fire. Just because of the production that Glasner was able to get from Mateta, if Igor Jesus is nailed at 6 million, Nico Williams. No, Igor Jesus.
Okay, who's the one to avoid the risk?
I think people will go for Murillo. I don't think he'll pick up DEFCON. He's the kind of player that you used to see in the 2000s on Match of the Day and think, I really wish he was in my team. But what data tells us is he's not going to pick up DEFCON, and therefore there's better picks at his price point.
And lastly, who's the differential?
Depends who plays in the 10 with Gibbs White. And we spoke about this in the midfielder part. Like, I really rate Dan and Doy. I really rate Backwet. I'm just not sure how they fit within this team. So whoever plays with Gibbs White in the dual 10s, considering that you have a number of players around the 6.0 and below that could fulfill that role, they could be a good differential.
If a Stan and Doy, he just needs to stay on side. That's what he must do.
Has he got a problem with this?
Yeah.
Yes, he has.
Yeah. These are the kind of little tidbits that you just, as someone who's not a fan of Nottingham Forest, you just miss out on. You miss out on the fact that Dan and Doy is a serial offside offender.
Yeah. Anything from you, Chelsea? You want to ask the prof while he's on?
No, I've been like a sponge, just soaking it all up. I'm trying to gain reassurance. Like, is that right? Now I'm going, do I drop out Gibbs White?
No, keep him.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. I'll keep him, I promise.
just for the benefit of the listeners then, Professor, what if somebody's willing to invest in the premium content of a Lazy FPL, what can they expect to receive from you guys and the team?
Do you know what I'd say? Like, and there's probably a terrible way to endorse us and to sell us, especially when you just prop me up so nicely. Sign up for the free newsletter. It's free. There's no catches involved. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. And if you're enjoying that and you want to hear me talk about other teams, a lot of it is just general football takes that you can listen to and disagree with me on. Then you can decide to join us for a month, and then if you don't like it, cancel. We're extremely customer friendly. It was just 3 lads who set up a business, and it's surprisingly gone well. And we still don't really know what we're doing. So yeah, don't spend your money. Just sign up for free on the newsletter, and then if you like it, feel free to chip in.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said earlier, it's my go-to for content from an FPL perspective, and I like it a lot. So I certainly got an endorsement.
Thank you very much,
from
man.
me for there. Right, just a bit of housekeeping before we draw to close. The Tricky Talks Podcast League is live and active. If you want to join, the code is 17S8PO. That's 17S8PO. So if you want to join, feel free to do that. And the last thing that I'm going to say, Professor, is see you in the next one.
Hey, stealing me line. Stealing me line.
But,
yeah, thank you very much for having me, by the way. It's been class.
Yeah, thanks for giving up your time. I know you're very busy, and I appreciate the time you've given us. And maybe we'll have you on again later in the season to monitor how things have gone from a fantasy perspective and Forest players in particular.
December 19th, Nottingham Forest vs Everton. Depends if we win. If we win, I'll be back on. If we lose, you won't hear from me.
All right, but yeah, once again, thanks for coming on, and much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Ta-da.